Hello. Oh, hello, hello, hello. Okay, good morning, NDC Oslo. Thank you for dragging your butts out of bed today. I know everybody was like a Wednesday night, everyone enjoys having a drink. Welcome to a talk called Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, What is the Vainest Metric of Them All? So I also like to call this Angry Old Irish Person Rants at the World, because this is exactly what it is. I would love to be able to say something like, close the doors, don't let anybody out, because at some point somebody is going to be offended. I apologize in advance about that. My name is Paul Stack. I'm Stack72 on Twitter. I work at a company called Pulumi. This does not reflect the company message of Pulumi in any way, shape, or form. It's very important that I tell you that, because I only just started working for them 1 month ago. I'm an infrastructure guy and I'm a DevOps guy, and I've been around the houses at different companies for quite a few years, so I've learned quite a few things. So this talk was born out of the complete and utter rubbish that I have spoken to different people about and different companies about in the last 6 or 7 years. Okay? It's basically companies trying to understand their success and reporting the numbers that make them look successful when in essence they still have a lot of work to do. This stage really freaks me out, by the way. I'm always afraid it's just going to fall. So if I do fall, thanks for coming. If the talk wasn't recorded or it was over beers, it will be funnier, I promise, because then you would really see the ranty side of me. So, what are vanity metrics? Oh, by the way, if I miss anything, put your hand up and shout out. It's much more fun that way, so everybody gets to feel part of it. So vanity metrics are metrics that make us look good to other people, but don't really give any substance to define our performance. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to give you the two most simple examples of vanity metrics there are. Okay? Twitter followers and Instagram followers. Okay? Is anybody obsessed with their Twitter follower numbers? Congratulations, you've all almost passed the test. Okay, I have to admit, I used to be obsessed by it. I really did. And I used to look and be very happy when I had a new follower or a group of followers, and I would try and work out where those followers came from and so on and so forth. But then I learned that it doesn't really mean anything, okay? Because most of the time, people we follow on Twitter or Instagram are because of things that we've seen or something that we relate to. And then all of a sudden, we sometimes don't relate to them anymore, and we unfollow. So just because you've had a spike and a drop, it doesn't really mean anything. There's no real substance there. So am I saying that all metrics are bad? Absolutely not. But all metrics, in some way, shape, or form, can be construed as vanity metrics. Let's think about the following scenario, okay? A company creates a new application, new web application, or a new iOS app or Android app or whatever, and a PR email was sent out, was created and sent out. 100,000 people got that email, and 100,000 people clicked from the link to the landing page of the application. So is the measurement of 100,000 page views a real metric or a vanity metric? And why? Does anybody want to give me an idea of what they believe? Who was it? Who said? Okay, so the man at the back says it depends. Okay, so what does it depend on?
Yeah, if you have a spike and then never going to enter it, it's a vanity. And if it's just a subset of all the users, then it's valid.
Okay, so to paraphrase what he said, if there's a spike and people land there and they don't really do anything else after that, it's a vanity metric. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying? Okay, so there's a couple of things going on here. Firstly, if you have a PR department that sends out an email to 100,000 people and 100,000 people click through, give them more money because they're brilliant at their job. But secondly, what could we measure here? And you're 100% correct. Just because 100,000 people land on the page, it doesn't mean that's 100,000 new users. It's just people landing on a page. They may not do anything about it after that. So what could we measure instead? So the same scenario goes through, we create the application, we send the PR email is sent out, 100,000 people arrive on the landing page. But what we should measure here is instead of that number landing, we should measure the number of conversions based off the back of that. Okay, because if you've gone from 100,000 page views to 20 application downloads, that's a much more meaningful metric that gives you an indication of success or failure. But of course, if you've gone from 100,000 to 20, most companies don't like reporting on that because that 100,000 number looks way better than that 20. Way, way, way better. So that's why we sometimes misconstrue our metrics and we report success when it's not always success. Now, there's a lot of companies that do this, okay? And this is a conversion funnel. And this basically maps, or companies use this in order to map a journey through a system. Okay, so like for the top, you have a large amount of people that have been sent out an email. Those people arrive at the application download. They download it. From the download, they then go and perform an action inside the application, and so on and so forth. And it gets more and more and more fine-grained. Okay, and quite a few people that I know, quite a few companies I know are very successful at doing this. So I worked for a company in America, makes me feel old now, like maybe 8 years ago, called OpenTable. And OpenTable were fantastic at this. Like, they were a company that were all about picking their metrics up, and they could understand at any point of the day whether the percentage of conversions on the reservations was up or down, or whether it was a seasonal flux or different things, because they had so good at getting the conversion metrics done. So how can I identify if a metric is measured in vain? Now we're going to get to the offensive part. I'm very sorry, people. Okay, number one, can I make a business decision based on this metric? If 100,000 people arrive on your page and you don't know anything after that, that is not something you can make a business decision based on. Because you can make a decision based on the fact that 20 people out of that 100,000 downloaded your application. So you probably need to think about the content on your landing page, or you probably need to think about the target of the people that you're sending the emails to. So it's something that you can do in that. Let's go back to the Instagram followers. Let's pretend, okay, let's pretend that I'm one of those very cool influencers, okay, on Instagram. We all know these people who get sent lots of free stuff, and they're like, oh, look at my amazing products that I use on a day-to-day basis. I promise they're not free. Let's pretend I'm one of those people, and they get 1 million followers on Instagram. Does that indicate that they're doing their role well, or does it need a collection of additional metrics in order to support that? Anyone want to give me an idea? Everyone just here to have a little sleep? Awesome. I wish I was still sleeping as well. So 1 million followers in itself doesn't really do anything. Because if you have 1 million followers, you can buy that. You can write a bot. You can do any of these different things that allow you to do it. A better metric will be, out of those 1 million followers, how many people click your referral links to the products that you are selling or the products that you are actually promoting. That's a much more additional metric that you require in order to understand the success of what you're doing. Number of followers doesn't mean anything. I would love to stress this more. Number two, can I intentionally repeat the result? Think about my followers again. For those who don't know, you can buy 100,000 followers on Instagram for $50. It's that cheap. Okay, you can probably buy a Russian bot for even cheaper. But it shows that you could close your Instagram account, open a new account, spend $500 and have the same 1 million followers again and be in the same situation. So it's intentionally repeatable. So therefore, it doesn't really mean anything. It's like you can cheat the system every single time. And the most important thing is the data a real reflection of the truth? The word truth. Okay, so if my goal is to be a good influencer, then it's very, very easy for me to understand the truthfulness of what I'm trying to do. Because I can measure my referrals, you can use links and you can use referral IDs in your links and so on and so forth, and you can track back to what you're doing. But it's very, very, very important to understand one thing. External factors can really change the reflection of the truth. Now, what I mean by that is an example. In January 2018, for those who don't know, Facebook actually changed how they prioritized newsfeed information. Okay? So what they did is they prioritized local newsfeed information over global newsfeed information. So all of a sudden, all these like local companies were getting a huge influx of people because it was local to where the people were. Therefore, people were able to see the content more. Now, of course, at that point, the marketing department or the PR department must have thought, wow, all of a sudden we're brilliant at our jobs, and we don't know why. So it's important to understand that there are always external factors that can stop us doing it. Now, of course, we can apply these questions to any measurement and help us determine if it's important or not. Okay, and let's give some real-life examples in order to try this. I'm sorry if you disagree with this part. This is the funny part because this is where angry old Irish person who's usually a little drunk just rants at the world and tells people that what they're doing is sometimes not correct. So, number of deploys a day. Shall we say this is vanity, or shall we say this is an okay metric to measure? Anyone?
Vanity.
Oh, very interesting. Vanity. Why vanity?
Who cares?
You're my new favorite person. The lady said, who cares? So I totally agree, okay? And I used to be obsessed with getting to number of deploys a day. And I read blog posts around 50 deploys a day and 20 deploys a day. I even created dashboards around how many deploys a day was happening. And then I realized, you know what? I could make one deployment. That could cause a bug. Then I would have to make another deployment to fix that bug. Is that 2 deploys? Well, no, it's fixing my crap from the first deploy. So maybe I should measure the second one. And then I was like, so what does it really matter how many deploys a day? The metric that we actually want here is, can we deploy at any time in the day? Can we deploy at any point in our system because we have the confidence in our system? And it's a much better metric to make. Okay, there's a whole list of them. We're going to go through them because we're going to joke at things. Okay, Twitter followers, rubbish. Blog page views. This is interesting. Blog page views. Anyone think it's vanity or not? I believe it's a piece of both. I really believe it's a piece of both. Because firstly, yes, it can be a vanity metric because of the fact that it's just a number and doesn't really reflect anything. But secondly, it can also be very good because, for example, you've written a very important security blog post or a very important piece of infrastructure blog post and people are relating to. Now, off the back of this, and this is a recent metric for me. Somebody told me in the last time I gave this talk. People measure the time spent on the page. Okay? Now that to me sounds like a complete vanity metric. Because it may not be. It may not be. Maybe it's very useful to your company, but for me it does. The reason being is that sometimes I open up a web page and I walk away and I make myself a coffee and it takes me 15 minutes and then I remember, I was reading that page. Let's go back and finish it. So I have made the average time on the page rise quite a lot because I've just sat idle on the page for 15 minutes. So a better metric would be the engagement on the page, whether they're moving around, whether they're engaging with different parts of the page based on tooling around that. So there are heat map tools that you can put on your systems that will determine if people are moving around the page and interacting with it. It's a much better way of it. Okay. Greens at the end of a conference talk. Vanity or not? By the way, you can vote on the way out. And I promise I won't be offended if it's not green. It doesn't really matter to me. So I'll give you an example why. I believe this is a little bit vanity and a little bit good. Firstly, it's good because it will tell you if you have actually marketed your talk correctly and if people are able to engage and actually follow what you're doing. Of course, if they're doing that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a green because of the fact that they may not agree with it or so on and so forth. But secondly, the number of greens itself is sometimes a misnomer. Because a talk like this, we don't have that many people. Okay? A talk like, for example, Troy Hunt's one of the best speakers I've ever heard. Like, you go to a security talk for his, the room is completely packed and there's people standing around the edges. So the numbers that go to that talk is automatically higher than the number would be in a smaller talk like this. So a better one would be a percentage. Percentage of the colors would be a much better representation. And I absolutely hate it when conferences make leaderboards of the numbers. Okay, because it doesn't really mean anything. And it actually can demote demotivate people from giving talks, because if they give a smaller talk and they get less greens, then people are like, I'm never going to be on that leaderboard, or look at how far down the leaderboard I am. Maybe I'm not very good at what I do. So sometimes it's very, very demotivating when you have a vanity metric that is like a personal metric towards people. The number of GitHub commits. So again, I was obsessed by this. Okay, I really was obsessed by this. And the reason I was obsessed by this was, excuse me? Oh, you cannot see the screen. 1 second. You will be able to see the screen very shortly. There we go. Let's make sure there's nothing sensitive on my screen. Okay, I was super, super excited about the number of commits I used to make. Okay, and then I sort of realized when I looked through my commits that most of the commit messages were rubbish, and it was things like fix tests, update changelog, change test, so on and so forth. So then I completely changed my strategy of how I worked, and I sent pull requests, and when I was merging my pull request, I squashed all of my commits into one, into a meaningful commit to understand what was going on. And I used to love my graph. I really used to love it. I used to be one of those people that would try every day and push a new GitHub commit because I wanted a full graph. And then I realized that, you know what, life is a little bit, there's like a little bit more to do out there rather than sit in front of my computer all day. And I took like sporadic breaks around different things. We're not going to talk about this period of my life right here just because it makes me sad. Bad company experience. It's okay. It's okay. We'll get them back for it. I promise. Now. So yes, the commits itself don't mean anything. It's much better about the content of the commits and the meaningfulness of what you're trying to achieve and push back to your repos. Number of GitHub issues and pull requests. Do we think this is a good one or a bad one? Oh, good? Very good. Why? So he said good. Why do we think so? Okay, so it's good because somebody's actually like using the system or so on and so forth. But I challenge it in the same way, is that if it's number of issues, could that potentially mean that there's a lot of bugs? So it can be good and it can be bad. And as you can see, you can misconstrue it very easily. Because I could turn around and say, my project has had 50 pull requests from external contributors. That's awesome because people are using it. Or I could look at it another way going, that means that it's really bad and people have to fix it up. So you can look at things in both ways every single time. Okay, build times. Actually, let's go back to GitHub commits 1 second. I'm not going to say who it was, but there was a person posted on Twitter a while back that said they were at a company for 2,695 days. And in that time, they created 6,000 commits and 1,114 pull requests. Now, my maths is not fantastic, but 2,695 days sort of suggests about 6 or 7 years at a company. And in that time, they pushed 6,000 commits. That's a person who wasn't going for the highest number of commits award, so therefore I'm suspecting that it was very meaningful commits. So sometimes that's the way we look at things, the value we add to a company across the time, not the value that we're adding at this specific second due to number of metrics. Let's go back to build times. Build times are amazing. Like really, really, really amazing. Anyone heard that the build should be under 10 minutes? Yeah, some people. Okay, I used to believe that. I worked at a company recently. Again, it's the one I'm kind of bitter about. That was reporting the number of builds and the average build time up the chain. I am not joking. The metric of success was our builds has gone from 1 minute 26 to 45 seconds. Okay? And it was because we changed build tool. So it was a tool that did, it only built what needed to change rather than building everything every time. And they were presenting the number of green builds a day. Okay? And people were looking at these metrics going, well, this is a symptom that work is being done. And I'm like, are you guys joking me? Like, are you serious? The number of builds a day, the time spent in build. Now, that's not a person looking at the machine. Builds happen in the background. You shouldn't need to worry how long it takes. Of course, if it's a symptom that your build takes 6 hours, then maybe, you could split it up a little bit and you could measure it in a different way, and there's actions that you can take based off the back of it. But from a build going from 1 minute 20 something to 45 seconds, that's completely rubbish. Like, honestly, and I argued with my manager for 45 minutes about why we shouldn't care. And his words were, and I will never forget them, and he's a very good friend of mine, he said, people care about these metrics. And I was just blown away. I was really just blown away. Actually, after that is when I started writing this talk. Because I was just like, this is just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And then more and more came out. Like, really more and more came out. Okay, the number of GitHub stars or forks. Do we think it's good or bad? Again, I can think of it as both. The reason being is that if it's a starred repository, it's very popular and people want to go back to it. If it's forks, then maybe there's something going on. Maybe people are trying to use it in a different way. I have a repository that is maybe 13 years old on GitHub, and it has a lot of forks. The reason being is because I'm lazy and I have archived the project, and people need to fork it so they can extend it and use it themselves. So it doesn't mean anything. It just means that it's a number, that's all. You need something around it. So for example, if people are forking your project or starring your project, how many people of those are actually using it or cloning it or downloading it? Unless you can measure that, it's like a pointless metric in itself. Number of application downloads. Anybody not have a smartphone? Okay, so pretty much everyone here has a smartphone, right? How many times have we downloaded an app, opened it once, and then just deleted it? I do it at least once per day. At least once per day. And therefore, I'm inflating people's metrics. And sometimes when I download it, I don't even open it because I know at that point when I see the logo when it's downloaded, I've downloaded the wrong app. Okay, so the number of application downloads in itself means nothing. You need to work out the number of people engaging with it at the same time. Oh, here we go. We're going to get it more interesting. We're really going to get more interesting. The number of story points achieved per sprint. Can anybody tell me WTF a story point is? I've been a developer for quite a few years, and I have no idea still to this day what a story point is. And then we moved from story points to t-shirt sizes. Like, what? Who even decided that was the right thing to do? Like, honestly, is it a normal person t-shirt size? Is it a slim-fitting t-shirt size? Is it an extra? Like, come on, what is it about? These are just stupid things that people make up. So, number of story points achieved per sprint. That could be great. You could achieve 5,000 in a sprint, but it means you're really bad at estimating. It also means you're really bad at working out the sizes of what you're trying to do. So it means 0 unless you can measure it based on that. Okay? Then people started doing estimation planning accuracy measurements, which is in itself feels great. So you have a meeting at the start of your sprint, then you have a retrospective, and then you have a meeting after that to work out if your sprint has been good or not. It's just meetings themselves. We all go to meetings. I'm very lucky. I work remote 10 hours ahead of my team. Really, I don't have to talk to many people. This is why they don't let me out very much, because I'm just angry. I'm really just an angry person. So meetings. People go and sit in meetings with their laptops, and people ask them a question, and excuse me, sorry, I wasn't paying attention because I was on Facebook or I was on Twitter or whatever. Meetings are one of those things that are massive sunken cost of companies. And there are actually estimators out there that you can put the number of people in the room into this estimator, and it'll tell you how expensive the meeting is. And it got to the point in some of the companies I worked at, is when I went in, I opened it on the screen, and I actually put it in, and I left the timer running so people could see the number and the cost of the meeting going up and up and up. And then companies were like, in order to keep the meeting short, we'll have a planning meeting about the meeting. Come on, this is just stupid metrics. How much money is just wasted in this stuff? The cost of infrastructure. I'm an infrastructure engineer. I have been automating infrastructure for a long time, and this frustrates the hell out of me. So what I mean by this is we can't really have a development environment that matches like our staging or our production environment because it's expensive. Well, the reason it's expensive is probably because you haven't invested enough time in order making it scriptable that you can bring it up and tear it down very easily. Yeah, but by doing that, and it's like, oh my God. So the cost of infrastructure is a huge, huge vanity metric because they're looking at it going, well, you know, the cost of our infrastructure is only $100 a month. Can anyone use it? Probably not. Like, really, probably not. So a better metric here would be how successful is our infrastructure based on what we're trying to achieve? Does our infrastructure fulfill what we're trying to do? Or do we have a representative infrastructure of what our production environment is like, and therefore developers can do the job that they're paid to do? Cost of travel. You know what, we're going to come back to this one. We're really going to come back to this one. Cost of developer productivity. Hands up, who has been at a company where you've asked for a piece of software and it's taken a long time for procurement to get you the piece of software? Yes. Now, how frustrating is that? How much time have you lost because you don't have that piece of software that makes you productive? There are many, many companies out there that create great tools that allow us to do our jobs better and faster. When we're happier at work, we're more productive. When people put these types of barriers in place, we get annoyed and we want to start thinking, what's the point of me being here? You know, we start to question the world, we start to question why we're even born, and so on and so forth. So we're at the point where just give people the $200 or $300 piece of software and let them be good at what they do. Because what we have at our company is valuable assets, and because they're valuable assets, we should make them feel good. Jesus, code coverage. This is the one that starts to get contentious. Anybody tell me if they like or loathe or think code coverage is a vanity metric and why? I'll wait. We're not going to move off this one until we have a valid discussion. I promise.
It's good up to a point, but once it gets up to having 100% code coverage, that's crap.
Okay, so it's good up to a point, but once it gets to something like 100% code coverage, then it's crap. Interesting. Tell me why. I love this.
I think there's value. Now I'm questioning myself.
Yes! Yes, this is what we're doing. Come on, let's do it.
No, it's entirely a vanity metric because it doesn't reflect the accuracy of the underlying tests.
Wonderful. So he's not questioned what he was asking, and now he's thinking it's a vanity metric because it doesn't value the code of the underlying test. Is that correct?
Yes, because I can write a test that just executes the code, and then I can get 100% code coverage, and it didn't actually test anything.
Yes.
If you don't have any tests, it does indicate a problem.
Yes, as well. The lady said if you don't have any tests or code coverage, it indicates a problem. Both of you are 100% correct. Both of you are 100% correct. So here's the scenario I will give you. Oh, I love this. This is much better. This is now we really get into ranting. We'll go back to some of the other ones if people are feeling in this mood. So code coverage is, yes, it's good, and yes, it's bad. Now, when it's good, it shows you that you are testing what you're doing and you're confident in your system. But when it's bad is when you are spending more time updating your tests than the actual code. Anybody TDD in here? Test-driven development? Okay, so test-driven development, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form is bad. That's not it at all. That's not what I'm telling you. And I'm not telling you that you shouldn't have code coverage. What I'm telling you is that sometimes the metrics itself don't reflect what you're trying to do. So for example, you can write a unit test that executes just one tiny small piece of the code, but that small tiny piece of the code is only used by maybe 1% of your user base or your engagement rate. Okay, so you've well tested that tiny function, but if it only gets hit once every 120,000 times somebody arrives on a site, what's the point of testing that function? Unless it's a very big function or unless it's a very important function. Now, a friend of mine, the reason I started questioning code coverage is I used to try and be TDD, and then I got lazy, like we do as developers. And a friend of mine actually was like a real TDD, like driven person. And at the end of every time he started creating his classes and started finishing his work, he deleted all the tests that he wrote on the way there. And I was like, wow, why? He said, because every time someone comes in and works on that piece of code, they got to get into my mindset of how I wrote those tests and how I then wanted to change and test every permutation, and they would have to try and work out what was happening in the tests before the code. I was like, what? He was like, so next time when they come in, what they will do is they will write a test against the function, their own test, their own testing way, and they will work out if the function is actually representative of what's there or not, rather than the code that was left over from the previous developer. I was like, wow. And I was like, so you do this every time? And he said, yes. So I said, what is your percentage code coverage? He says, officially 0, because there's no tests around like that. It's like, okay, but how confident are you in your code? He says, 100% confident in my code, because I know I've written it in a testable manner, because I've done it with tests the whole way through. And it was fascinating to have this conversation with this person, like really fascinating, because it was just a completely different perspective on what we're usually told around craftsmanship and clean code and all these different things. Of people saying, you must do this, you must do this, you must do this. Whereas he had broken the mold in a completely different way. So it was very interesting for me. Lines of code per day. I'm a big offender about this. I really am. And the reason I'm a big offender about this, I actually told someone yesterday that in 8 lines of code, you can do this. And the person was like, is that like 8 lines without spaces between the lines? Or, was it Go formatted? And I was like, it was 8 lines, right? It was 8. But there are still some places in the world that do get paid on lines of code per day. I'm not kidding you. There are some, they're like code sweatshops, to put it bluntly, I'm sorry. But they are, like where companies like hire out like just to get code written, to get like features delivered, and they're paid on the number of lines of code per day. And can you imagine how shoddy some of that code must look if you're paid per line of code? Like your variables are like wrapping because the names are so long. Does that mean it's an extra line? Like these are crazy things that people do. And like there are actually applications out there that will allow you to count the number of lines of code in your system. And this one has annoyed me for so many years. The reason it's annoyed me for so many years is because on a monolithic C# application I worked on about 10 years ago, I was curious to know how much code there actually was, and there was 1.6 million lines of C#. Okay? Now, if you had to rewrote that, you probably could have reduced that to maybe 100,000 lines of C#, because so many people had written so much crap across the years and didn't even know if code was reusable or not. So wouldn't a better way of measuring lines of code per day or things like that, wouldn't it be better to understand that I have added value because we've been able to reuse this function, or we've been able to refactor? There you go, refactoring. So people who measure in lines of code a day, you really think they refactor? You really think they use principles like dry? No, they'll copy and paste the methods and call it something else. That's what I would do if I was paid. Not that I am paid in that way, in shape or form, of course. So what's the worst offender? Anybody have any favorites out of those? No? Nobody really care? I love it.
Lines of code.
Lines of code is your favorite. Anybody? Excuse me?
Irish people.
Number of Irish people. We don't have a metric for that. We need a number of Irish people per conference. That would be an amazing metric, because then you know there would be a good party. That's all. That's a measurable metric right there. Okay. My worst offender is the cost of travel. Oh my God. Unless you work for a company that makes 0 money, don't be stingy. Please do not be stingy. What I mean, stingy is an Irish word, sorry. Don't be cheap. Okay? Don't try and cheap your employees out of their travel. I will give you an example. I swear, if this wasn't recorded, I could really go off on one right now. And anybody who's interested in this, they can definitely meet me for a beer a bit later, and I'll tell you the whole thing. Okay, so when I travel, I don't want to lose my personal time. Okay? I work 5 days per week, sometimes 6 or 7, depending on what's going on in my life or what's going on at work and so on and so forth. So when I have time that I have set aside for myself, I do not want to give that up. Now, the funniest thing about companies is they will expect you, if you're traveling, to travel on a Saturday or Sunday so that you're in the office on Monday morning. I used to go back and forward to San Francisco once per month, maybe twice per month for about 2.5 years. And it became very painful. And that's when I started realizing that traveling was important. So I was a remote worker recently, and I was asked about going to a country in the Far East. And I had to be there on Tuesday and leave on Friday. No problem. 4 days, like, no issue at all. I don't really care about jet lag. I usually drink through it, so there's no real problem. You think I'm joking. This is the secret to jet lag. It's why I don't even remember what day it is most of the time, but that's okay. So if I had to be there on a Tuesday, I could fly on the Monday because it's only going a certain amount of hours forward and there's no problem. So I looked at the prices of flights on the Monday, and I could see that a business class flight was costing 2,500 euros. Pretty cheap return, right? Really pretty cheap. The company were like, no, we want you to fly on Sunday. You can arrive on Monday, and it's 700 euros. I was like, so do I get an extra day off next week because you've lost my Sunday? And they're like, no. Well, I'm not doing it. Obviously, I'm not doing it. And I had a massive problem with not my boss, but my boss's boss, who was in that office in the Far East. And he was like, I don't understand. I've asked you to come to the office, so I expect you to be in the office. And I went, I've asked you for a business class flight. You've said no, so I'm not going. He was like, so tell me why. Tell me why you can justify a business class flight. And I said, one, my health, because it's crazy important. Right? I'm a big guy trying to fit my fat ass in economy. It don't work very well. It really doesn't work very well. Secondly, he said, maybe premium economy. I said, do you believe that I can sleep appropriately in premium economy? I said, would you travel premium economy? He said, no. So I said, why should I? Then he said, so justify your productivity when you would be in business class. I said, immediately, business class has power. It has somewhere I can plug my laptop into. Economy does not. He said, but your laptop can it has 5 hours battery life. Yeah, have you ever tried to compile applications continually on 5 hours battery life? That 5 hours maybe goes to 1. He said, what? Is that I was just let's not pull at that thread. So we argued back and forward about this price of travel, and it got to the point where I was just like, do you know what? I'm not going. You can all go without me. I don't really care. I'll stay in my comfortable office from home while you're all jet lagged and you're all doing whatever you want. And he was very angry at me. So I try and encourage companies now, do not cheap out on your staff. Really. For many reasons. One, their health, their happiness, and their free time is very important. But secondly, and most importantly, if you start to pull this crap on them, they will look for a company that don't pull this crap. They will look for a company that treats them better. They will look for a company that they will feel happier. So an engagement metric here is about how useful their time is, how useful it is for them to travel in a way that's a little more expensive that makes their life better. Staff retention is a great, great metric that not many companies look at. They really do not. And staff retention around me sometimes is flawed because that is a vanity metric because I move companies so much because I get grumpy and I leave. But honestly, it's very, very important that you engage with your staff and actually work out if they're happy based on things. And I'm not saying send them a 25-minute survey, okay? Because they will be grumpy if they get that type of engagement. Okay. Honorable mentions. Cost of infrastructure and cost of developer productivity. Give me the tools that I want or that I need to do my job, and I will do the job that you have paid me to do. Okay? You can depreciate the cost of a new laptop, a powerful laptop, or a powerful machine, or the cost of some software over X amount of months or X amount of years. I believe somebody actually worked out the price per time that they used ReSharper, like a JetBrains tool. For every time that they actually used the refactor in it, it would save them something like 16 cents in developer time. So they took out this and they put a big spreadsheet together of how much it made per day and how many times a day they used it and how many blah, blah, blah. And they gave it to their boss and said, look, if you buy me this software that's $200 or $300, that's going to save me like 2,000 or 3,000 development time just a month alone. Interesting way of doing it. You shouldn't have to bargain that hard for that piece of software. For like $200 is nothing. How many times have we gone out and spent $200 on a meal and drinks? A lot. It's like we don't think of things in that way. How many times have executives signed off these huge drink bills because they're client entertaining? That's a very good metric, isn't it? Let's point out how many times they do something. Actually, we're not going to do that one, or we can get in trouble. Cost of developer productivity is a huge thing. But closer to my heart is the cost of infrastructure. Okay, so we're in 2019 now. There are companies that are creating tools that allow us to manage our infrastructure better, that allow us to automate it, that allow us to make it repeatable. Like infrastructure management has become a first-class development practice these days because the people know that it's very, very important. I'm not saying anything, but I work for a company that does this. Go and check out our tool. I'm not telling you the name. But it's very, very important that you need to allow people to be confident in what they do. And this is the most important. Confidence is a huge, huge engagement metric. Okay? How many people would deploy on a Friday afternoon? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So few compared to that's in this room. Okay? I'm pretty much confident that it's down to confidence in your system or the reliability of your deployment techniques or stuff like that. There'll be a number of different engagements. Okay? I would happily deploy any time of the day. I have, just to annoy the people that I used to work with, deployed from beaches. I was on the boat trip last night. I made a deployment of one of our pieces of software just because I needed to get it fixed. And then I took a picture, sent it to my boss with it. I was like, I've just deployed from a boat in Norway. And he's like, you need to get a life. But, and it's a case of, we've practiced it so many times, so it doesn't really matter. But the reason we practice it so many times is because we have the tooling that allows us to practice and we have the tooling that allows us to test. We spin up infrastructure, we do all the runs, we do all the checks, we do all the automated checks, and we run it and we spin everything down. If we didn't have that, it would be strictly a Monday morning deployment so that I could watch it and babysit that deployment the whole way out. And this is what's happening. We need to start leveling up in these types of areas in order to make us more successful in what we achieve. And I'll tell you right now, the cost of developer productivity and the cost of infrastructure underpins every one of those vanity metrics that I've showed you the whole way up. Because if your deployment technique sucks and you can't deploy your applications, you can't measure. You can't get people to your systems. Your systems will fail. Your systems will have bugs. You can't fix and patch them directly. You can't do any of these things without being good at the basics. Okay? You can report whatever success metrics you want the whole way up the chain. You can greens, you can do times, you can do numbers, you can do whatever. Unless you can show that what you do is repeatable in a different way, repeatable, and then that you understand why it's in that way every time, then it means nothing. You think scientists run an experiment once and go, there we go, that's the answer? No, they run it, they run it, they run it, they run it. They try and disprove themselves every time. And when they get the same results every time in the same expected way, then they know this is the formula, this is the way to do it. We're starting to do it now, but we're not quite there yet. So you've ranted at me for 40 minutes, and you've told me what metrics are crap. So tell me what to collect. Now, this is a very small subset. This is just to give you an idea of what type of metrics that I collect. Okay? Work in progress. I am really bad at context switching. I don't think there's many people in development today who are very good at context switching because it's not what we're designed to do. We're designed to take a task and we're designed to see that task through to completion and then we do something else. There are many techniques that we have designed over the years in order to keep us focused in that different way. Things like Pomodoro technique, things like, there's applications that you can install in your systems that will block out like social media and stuff for a certain period of time, and then you get back to like focusing on the job. But measure your work in progress. If you have one piece of work completed and 16 pieces that's in progress, you probably need to rethink the prioritization of what you're trying to do. And it's something that can actually be measured. Number 2, cycle and lead time. Now, lead time here is the time from when an idea happens until when work starts, okay, because there's like a lead time to get it sort of into the flow. And cycle time is the time from when the work starts until it's finished, is like the whole way through. Of course, we're not going to go into the definition of done. Then we would need beer. But it's important to say is like if your cycle time is crazy, then you may have a problem in your system. And the reason this one's very important to me is at OpenTable, we actually measured our cycle time. Okay, it's I should put the graph up, but it would like take me looking through slides. It's very interesting because we would have 4 weeks of a sprint. Each team would have 4 weeks of a sprint. And then we would take an entire week to merge all of that code back into master. I'm not kidding. Literally an entire week. Okay, because one team went, then the next team had to go. And if you were at the front, great. If you were at the last team, oh my God, it was a disaster. And then we had 3 weeks of testing. Then we had a week of acceptance by product owners. Now we're 8 weeks into after when the work started, by the way. Okay? And then it sat around for operations to deploy it. So the cycle time was something along the region of when a piece of work started till it went to production, it was 9 or 10 weeks. Okay, as soon as I plotted this and showed this to the new CTO, he was like, well, we're cutting that, and we're cutting that, and we're cutting that, and we're cutting that, because we measured it. We could see the bottlenecks in our system. We could see what was happening. We could see the areas in which we could improve. So just by measuring it, it was amazing. And we got our cycle time down from weeks and weeks to the first stage was like down to 2 weeks, and then by the time I left the company, we were at minutes. Like literally a piece of work could flow through the entire system in minutes, depending on the size of the work, of course, or the criticality of it. It was like that's that fast. Mean time to resolution. You must, I nearly swore. I hate when I'm on camera because I swear lots more. I'm an Irish person. We're allowed to. It's like allowed. It's okay. We have it in our contracts. So mean time to resolution, you must measure the time in order to work out if you're getting better at fixing bugs. Okay? We are all guilty sometimes of bugs coming into our system, and they're just like, let's ignore that one. That's more difficult. I can't recreate it. Blah, 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 blah. Right? Measure the time taken from when a bug comes in until it's fixed. I promise you, you will spend an extraordinary amount of time trying to make that metric better. Because we're really good when the easy ones comes in, and we go, that's easy fixed. This one looks a bit more difficult. Maybe you can do that one. Teflon. Okay? Mean time between failures. Okay? This is also really important. This is not something I started doing until the past 2 years. Okay? The reason being is that if you have bug, you need to spend some better time on your software, or maybe your company is putting a little too much pressure on you to deliver. Because when the pressure goes on, standards slip. When standards slip, users are affected. When users are affected, money stops coming. So if you've gone through a period where you had bug after bug after bug after bug after bug, you can then start to isolate where in the system that is and whether you need to spend time in that area. Crazy important metric. Very, very important metric. Application crash rates. We live in a modern society where smartphones basically drive everything these days. If you open an application and all it does is crash, you will look for a new application that will replace it. If you're an iOS or an Android or a mobile developer and you do not measure application crash rates, this is the only thing I expect you to take away from this talk, apart from the fact that Irish people are grumpy. But it's really important to understand that you need to know when your system fails. Really important to know that. I have another talk, and I actually asked the audience, hands up, whose system has gone for an indeterminate amount of time without crashing? One person put their hand up, and I said, it's because you have no monitoring. The person was like, what? I was like, do you have monitoring? He went, not really. And I was like, so there you go. You have no idea what's going on in your system. We are human. We make mistakes. That's just what happens. So we should measure them. I talked earlier about the number of issues and pull requests. I said it was a vanity metric, but I also said it could also be very good. The reason I said it can be very good is that we should measure the rate. Okay, now I'm not saying that you write a bot and you try and open and close as many Jira issues as you can or GitHub issues in order to make your open and close rate look impressive. And somebody actually tweeted me and told me that they're going to do that. I said, please don't. But it's much more around the fact of very prominent open source projects have a large amount of issues and a large amount of pull requests. And sometimes we get very frustrated when it looks like the numbers are not decreasing. And it looks like the project is not moving forward. But more importantly, it's usually because lots of issues are being closed and lots of issues are being opened. So measuring the rate of change and the time of mean time to resolution, between those two metrics, we can get a real grasp of how important and how actually moving forward our software is. And it's very, very, very interesting. Release cycle time. The reason I mention this is for two reasons. One, it allows us to practice our releases, and it actually allows us to understand what's going on in our release process and see if we can make it better. But more importantly, if we have a very fast release cadence and we have a very good and well-structured practice, we can move very fast and we can start to experiment on our system. Okay? System experimentation is where companies are starting to make a lot more money. I'll go back to the open table example. We used to have hack days, 30% time, whatever you want like to call them. And a guy just put together a very, very, very small change in the improvement of how you find restaurants where you are. And it used to be that restaurants were located from the center of a point. So for example, like a train station or something like that. And it would then do a radius around that. So he was like, I would like to do it that you could put in something like, you know, a street address rather than anything else, rather than like a direct known location. And he actually increased like restaurant revenues for the small amount of people that tried it out. And it was because we had a very fast release cadence that we were comfortable putting that out, because if it went wrong, we could roll it back very simple. Okay? But it's also important for when you're fixing a critical bug. Very important for when you're fixing a critical bug. You need to be able to move fast in that area. And the last thing, and if you do not do it, please do it today. Measure your conversion rates. Think of things like the number of people landing on a page to the number of people registering. Think of people from the number of registers to the number of people making a purchase or making an action within your system. Okay, there's a website in the UK called lastminute.com. I can't remember where else it is. Okay, and what they actually do, because we're humans and we get distracted very easily, is when you go onto the booking path. So when you're inside the registration or inside the login and you're going through actually a reservation or a booking, they remove all of the banners on either side of the website because they don't want you to be distracted and click something else. So they've got this so good and so well done that they can actually work out their engagement rate because they have nothing else for people on the page to engage with, which is fantastic. It was a really good way of doing it. So it's important that we do this. It's a small sample. You don't need to measure all of these. It has to be specific to what you're trying to achieve in your organization, but it's just to give you some examples of what you can do. So we measure everything, right? No. Jesus, no. Yes and no. I take that back. Don't just throw metrics into a time series database if you have no idea what they are. Okay? Start small, start measuring, start working out the differences, and then you'll measure and collect more and more and more because you'll start to be able to correlate how data works together. But don't just spend a lot of time collecting data that you don't really care about or that you will never care about because it's not actionable within your organization or you don't have the people that's going to look at it. It's pointless. You're just collecting it for no reason at that point. I'm not going to tell that. That's a story about beer, and we're not going to do that. So in summary, because I don't have many minutes left, there are two types of metrics, okay? There are vanity metrics and there are actionable metrics. Okay, vanity, no one has a clue about what the number means and cannot take responsibility about why that number happened. Okay, and actionable metrics, there's a clear understanding of why it has happened. Think of a science experiment again. They hypothesize what happens when they do X. They do X, and they measure it, and they repeat it to make sure they get the same results for consistency. Okay? I'm not saying that these two sets of metrics are polar opposites. It's very important to realize that they can intersect because we even spoke about it as we went through. Some metrics can be construed in a good way, but also in a bad way at the same time. But think of them in terms of, can I repeat it? Do I know how it's happened? If I don't know how it's happened, it's probably not something I need to care about at this point, but maybe I need to think about how it's happened going forward. Measure how it has happened before. By understanding your actionable metrics and their usefulness, you can really start to experiment in your applications. This allows us to create much better systems for our users and should be really the number one goal of what we're trying to achieve in our company. We should all be trying to create value for our users. Users are not just end users, they're also internal users. Don't create crap systems for your internal company that people won't want to use them because it's pointless for them. Okay? Let's care less about our vanity metrics and more about our actionable metrics, and let's forget the number of things like Twitter followers and Instagram followers. Thank you very much. You can tweet me if you have any questions or come and find me at the end, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.